All right, so we are going to get started with the lunch panel here soon in few minutes. I want all of you to get settled down. It's going to be a live session. There will be a Q&A session last 10 minutes, so you will get chance to go live with your questions as well. For that, I want to make some announcements. So if you want the CE use for your recertifications, please reach out to us on VOVA, reach out to Shen on VOVA, he will get it for you. Also, after the lunch, there will be a photo booth in the same corner where the headshot guy was. So use that opportunity as well. Thank you. All right. Awesome. So I think we are all ready and live. So we'll get started with the lunch panel. I want to introduce Orion from Query On. Can, all right. Can everyone hear me? All right. All right. So let's go with this. All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Houston. Hello, everybody. I'm Orion Matthews, host of the Major Project Podcast. It's a podcast focused on capital projects, $1 billion and up. We're looking at the lessons learned, the war stories, the things that went right, and of course, the things that went oh so wrong about the biggest projects in the world. What you're about to witness is a conversation between 4 presidents of AACE International, with over 150 years of combined experience in project controls. They've seen everything from the top to the bottom of our space. So what we have is 4 presidents, a live stream, 200 people eating lunch, and 1 moderator who was specifically warned on the prep call, and I quote, "Good luck controlling this bunch." So this should be fun. We're also live streaming this session for the first time ever. So if you are watching on YouTube, hello, you're part of the experiment. If the audio cuts out or the camera falls over, just know that this is what happens when project controls people do media production. So before we get into it, a few thank yous. First to AACE Houston Gulf Coast section for inviting us to bring this podcast here. This is the 7th year of the symposium, I believe, and it keeps getting better. To the University of Houston, thank you for hosting us. There's something really great about having a conversation in a building that is full of people who are going to be running these projects in 10 years. So if you're one of the students, I hope that you speak up in the Q&A at the end of this session. And of course, thank you so much to our sponsor of the lunch event, LK Davis Consulting. We really appreciate you. Thank you for backing this. All right, let's introduce this amazing panel. First up, we've got Mike Nosbish. Mike was president of AACE back in 2011 to 2012. So he's got the longest view of anyone on this stage. Over 37 years in project management and controls across government, private sector. He's a fellow of AACE, of course. He holds more certifications than I can list in 30 seconds. And here's what I love about him. He's currently a visiting professor at Texas A&M. So he's not just talking about the future of the profession, he is literally on the ground in the classroom building it every day. Next, we've got Martin Darley. You're gonna notice pretty quickly that Martin is not from Houston. He's a Brit who's been adopted by the energy capital of the world. He's a chartered quantity surveyor with over 40 years of experience in the energy sector, a fellow of both RICS and AACE, which is actually a really rare combination. He served as AACE president in 2014 to 2015 and was recently a senior advisor at Chevron, where he provided strategic guidance and cost estimates for capital projects, including a $7 billion FPSO offshore project. Martin has a reputation for saying exactly what he thinks. So he should be a fun one. Next, we've got Chris Cadell. Chris is the director at Spire Consulting Group here in Houston. And he drew what might be the toughest hand in AACE history. He was president-elect during COVID in 2019 and then presided over 2020 to 2021. He's got 38 years of project management experience across oil and gas, infrastructure, manufacturing, life science. All over the world he has been. He is a registered PE in Texas, a fellow of AACE, of course, and these days, he spends most of his time as an expert witness in construction disputes, which means he's seen every way a project can go wrong, and he's been paid to explain why. He is also the funniest person on this panel, but don't tell the others that I said that.
We're waiting.
And finally, your president of AACE International, Michael Bennick. Michael is a managing director at JS Held, specializing in construction dispute resolution out of New York and New Jersey. He's worked on matters involving oil and gas facilities, power plants, transportation, infrastructure, petrochemical plants, offshore, you name it. What makes him unique is that Michael is the only sitting president on this panel. The other three can say whatever they want. They're past presidents. Michael still has the job, so he has to be a little more careful, and we'll see how long that lasts. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 presidents of AACE International, please join me in welcoming your president's panel.
Thank you.
Test. All right. Martin,
Yeah.
you told us in the prep call that cost engineering career is a little bit like snakes and ladders. You don't always know where you're going to end up and when you're planning. How did each of you land in this profession, and whose fault was it?
Okay. So I ended up in this profession. My fault. I wanted to be a rock guitarist like Richie Blackmore, but apparently my fingers and brain don't work like his. So I had to get a job, and I applied for a job as a trainee quantity surveyor at 18-year-old. Wasn't going to go to college, university. And I went for the interview, and apparently I was the cheeky chap when asked, what does a quantity surveyor do? And that's a straw poll, actually, you know, if anyone knows. And I just said at the interview, I have no idea, you're going to train me. And that's why I got the job. And I've called myself just about anything and everything along the way. I've navigated that snakes and ladders, some promotions, some relegations, some sideways steps. But the profession has been my guiding light, I guess. That's it. I was involved in the associations in the UK, RICS and AACE. When I came to the US, I said to the guys in the AACE, who do I look up? And they said, you know, basically look up those damn Yankees, you know? So I did, and wasn't paying attention, did a presentation, and then I was president of this section, then RD5, and then VP admin like Chris. Both me and him have lived in Pearland, so there's a commonality there. And then president, and here we are, full career. That was the only time I've ever been interviewed for a job. So it's a good career. Thank you.
Thanks. And Chris, how about you? Was there a project that sort of changed your trajectory that you can think of, or?
I think it's probably the first project I ever worked on when I moved from a general contractor to consulting. It was an oil and gas project where they really knew about project controls. I was focused on the cost and schedule for the owner. I had a great mentor with the consulting company I worked with. The project manager for Amoco, then VP, was a great guy. They both taught me a lot, and someone even suckered me into co-authoring a paper for this organization called AACE that I'd never heard of before, and that started my decline there. So.
One of your jokes.
Awesome. And Mike, I'm curious, when you have your students, if you talk a little bit about your history to them, what's your quick summary there?
Well, so sometimes I talk about project controls as being kind of the accidental profession, in that you start your career thinking you're going to go one way potentially, or focus on one area, and you get introduced to something related to project controls, whether that's scheduling, estimating, cost management, risk management, and you really, like that and want to focus on that, and then that kind of accidentally becomes the focus of your career. But what I've seen in teaching is that it's really only been recently. A lot of times in textbooks and other references, they would always talk about the career path in construction specifically, even though we're not all about construction, we're kind of focused there, is to become a project manager someday. And there were never actually, what I saw in these reference materials talking about becoming an estimator someday, or a cost engineer, or a scheduler. And a lot of times, I talk to my students about, if that's what you like to do and that's what you want to focus on, that can become the base of a very lucrative career that isn't necessarily all about managing projects. It's supporting projects, but there's other pathways to be able to rise up in the industry that you might, have a better feel for in terms of what you like doing. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, Michael, can you round us out and just give us a little quick bio?
Sure. And, talk about an accidental career. Getting into doing disputes and claims is, something I didn't even realize existed, right? And so I, like many, I finished engineering school. I went to work in the gas utility industry. That was sort of an easy path for me. My family had worked in the industry, and then I went to graduate school and got an MBA, and sort of, and I love the industry, love the people, but I, literally wanted to try something different, and had an associate of mine within the company that I worked for, who had actually went out and ventured and did some claims work and came back, and so I literally applied for a job, got the job, and I've been in that industry in a couple different firms, but really with the same people for 25 or so years. And, all of these firms that I've been with, push involvement with professional organizations, both from a social and a personal development level, and volunteering, giving back, and that's been an important part of my whole career, my whole life.
Awesome. It's interesting, Martin, snakes and ladders. Like, it does sound like you've all had very different paths, and then here you are, presidents. Wonderful story. Thank you for the intro. I think we all know you a little bit better now. So let's jump into a hot take. So this actually comes from, we sourced this off the internet, Christina Robinson, who I think actually is here too. What does preparing the next generation of project controls professionals look like? So Mike, you're the one on the stage who is actually in the classroom preparing that next generation. How would you respond to Christina's question? Are we doing enough to prepare the next generation?
Well, so the class that I'm currently teaching at Texas A&M is construction, accounting, and financial management, which I am not an accountant. I'm not a finance guy. We consider project controls to be more forward-looking and accounting to be more rearward-looking, just in general, right? No offense to any accountants that might be sitting out there. So we tried to, when I was asked to teach this course, the guy that directs the program is a former coworker of mine at Hill International years ago. He said, we really want to try to spin it, more towards cost engineering, more towards being forward-looking and understanding that we're using this accounting-based and financial-based information to be the basis of sound forecast moving forward, and a little less rearward-looking, right? So I've been trying to do that in the course, but the way that I've tried to hook them in terms of attention getters is to use case studies to really show projects that have been executed out in industry and things that have gone right and wrong. I use GAO, Government Accountability Office, to actually, the audits that they do on a yearly basis often have a ton of detail that's really relevant to what we do as project control professionals. So I've actually used 3 case studies that I pulled from GAO audits to actually show how real world applications can relate to what we're talking about in the classroom. And I have them actually present on it to the class. And then the last one is a group case study as well. So that is kind of outside of the purview of what you would normally think about, accounting and financial management. But I really wanted to, show them that being able to not only do an analysis, you also have to present the results of the analysis, not be shy about it, really come across as being an expert and really being recognized as a member of the team. So that's one of the reasons that one of the ways that I try to do it within my classroom. So,
maybe you could talk a little bit, or someone else could jump in and talk about that presentation, because that's like a soft skill. So in our industry, we focus a lot on that hard skill of like, these are your numbers, this is your SPI, but you just mentioned that you're incorporating that, that soft technique of delivering the story of your project. Do any of you have experience doing that? And
Yeah,
any
I
tips
don't
about
mind
that?
wading in like at the introduction, so I'll just bite on it. So that's a differentiator. There was talk earlier about what's the value in AACE and project controls. So one, you got to get the fundamentals out of the way. One of my mentors years and years ago at Fairfield and Gould in the UK, Gavin Knott, tapped me on the shoulder one day, and a self-appointed mentor, and said, you need to get qualified. You need to get certified. Just get it in the bank. Get it done. I always say that to anyone I've mentored and coached. It's your own credential, and you carry it with you. It's what differentiates you. In the States, not so much, but you go international, and you've got letters behind your name, and people start listening. And then you learn the skills, and they're going to change. AI is going to change the world. But I started my career, and we still had those cards used to put in the mainframe, right? So that's just another change, right? I'm not too worried about that. But the differentiator between, doing the work, and some people are quite comfortable doing that, or being an advisor to GMs in a corporation like Chevron, it's the soft skills. You've got to be able to influence people, right? No accountability, no decision making, what you're going to do. It's the soft skills that you've got to learn. And it's difficult for cost engineers. We're not wired that way. So I will accept that, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I wrote a paper a few years back, and I'd probably be scared to look at how far back it was, but it was about project controls reporting, having your message heard. So often you see these project controls report, and you come away with, so what? And it's really about presenting the information and here are the takeaways, and here's where the senior management, project management, whatever, what they should do with this information. There are decisions to be made, and being able to present that information in a way that they understand what they need to do is more meaningful than just laying out all these numbers or a schedule and something like that.
Yeah, being willing to make a recommendation in relation to the analysis or what you just reported on, that's the key. And I think a lot of our peers that I've seen are sometimes unwilling to put themselves out there to make that recommendation to management. And that's really what I think we need to aspire to do more moving forward in our careers in general, is have that confidence.
Great presentation this morning from Akin, and he talked about, having the strength of your conviction and putting your job on the line. I wouldn't, careful with that one. There's always finding where the edge is first, but that's really strength of your conviction. So you got to know your stuff. You got to know what you're talking about. There's only so many times you can bluff through situations, but it's the soft skills that, and you build a reputation as well. That helps.
And push back on the misnomer that engineer and technical people can't communicate, right? And it's something that maybe we spend a lot of time, if you went to engineering school, doing technical studies, and maybe less time. But the communication, the written communication, and I certainly can tell the difference, at least right now, in stuff that I get that might be AI generated versus what something's organic.
Yeah.
And learning that skill and practicing that skill, and getting feedback on that skill is as important as any other skill.
All right, you said AI, so
I did.
we got to jump to that.
I've heard
I
of it.
think.
Yeah.
Why
there's
not?
quite a few questions on that. Yeah. I'm going to just get Copilot out to help. Okay.
Okay, so Michael, as president, we've got 6,000 plus members figuring out what AI means to their careers right now. I've got a quote from Omar, who kind of ties this up. He's in the UK, actually, Omar Habib. And he asks, as project controls evolves with AI, automation, and live data, what should we focus on the most to stay truly valuable? So what are you seeing as the biggest impact right now with AI? Should the membership be excited or terrified?
If I had the solution right now, right, we'd be stepping outside and you'd be paying to get through the door, right? But it's a great question. It's I'm excited about it. I'm excited about our organization because when you have the ability to incorporate new tools, new ways to perceive things, new ways to look at things, I think this organization has always done a great job getting out front on that. And you know, we have, it's not only what they use professionally, but the association itself too has an obligation to sort of give tools to our members. And that's a bit of a challenge now. We're excited about the large language, I'm sorry, large learning model, right? LLM. Did I get that right? But that might already be out there because all our IP is out there. And that's a challenge for the association, is we want to sort of rein back in and get ownership of that, of our IP. And, you know, I see it at the end of the day as really an opportunity to apply a new set of tools. We've seen this historically. I mean, I know this one is a game changer across industries, but Martin mentioned the punch cards, right? You go back and look at large engineering projects at the turn of the century, you might see rooms full of engineers doing calculations and
I wasn't there, by the way.
Yeah.
No,
I thought.
no.
So that was a change, right? And it's a change that was pushed by technology and the ability to do these things in a different way. So, you know, AI will be the same. It's going to just be disruptive, but it's also going to be an opportunity, right?
Well, I think one of the things we talked about last night over dinner, we had to get together for dinner and a few drinks.
And beers, yeah.
To make sure we were prepared. We were talking about the fact that there's a lot more data now available than what used to be available back in the day. So, you know, now there's an opportunity, if you can have these large models that pull in more data, do more data analysis, we might find correlations to things that we'd never even thought of in the past.
I mean, I pile on. To me, it's very exciting times, right? Been waiting all my career for some enabler like AI, right? So we just touched on reporting. How long does it take to get a monthly report out from collating the data, putting it together, getting approvals, you know, issuing it, having the meeting, and no one pays any attention to it? AI is going to be right in your face. You're going to be able to dive into all sorts of data sources, but you better know what you're doing. You know, I remember when Spotfire came out, and had a guy in drilling who could produce 1,000 reports. Like, fantastic. Which one do I read? Yeah. So it ended up 3, which were the 3 we'd always read historically, right? So there's a skill in it. It's going to be a huge enabler. It's certainly going to change how we do work and where we do work. I know that's a theme we've sort of rolling in here, but if I had a career do-over, I'd do it, because I've been waiting all this time for some decent tools, you know, not having to rely on knowledge of a software or a program or being able to write access code or something, you know. I think it's good.
Yeah, until it fully takes over, someone's going to have to make the decisions, right? Based on the data, how to apply resources, limited resources. You know, you've seen in history where different industry financial models that were depended on in investments and assets that faltered and literally caused the market to crash, right? And so it's an over-dependence sort of at the time on the ability of these mathematical models. And so, you know, we're going to have our issues with AI-driven data collection, but, you know, at the end, I think that it'll be used by especially by our association members, as a tool that's going to improve the ability for people to make decisions and to you know, continue with their more sort of important work, right? Potentially.
So some students that I've talked to say that AI is going to take all the jobs. Like if you read, you know, the blogs,
Yeah.
and that they're not sure if they'll have a job in 7 or 8 years. And then, so Mike, you're working with students. What do you tell them? I'm sure you've run across this sort of apathy or this question. Do you have a response to your students, or how do you coach
In
them on
relation to
that?
AI, well, again, I think what Martin, pointed to is that AI should speed up the process, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's going to take someone who understands the project, understands the needs, understands the challenges to be able to interpret what, AI is providing in an expedited manner, right? But be able to, again, make a recommendation that moves that forward to management and becomes part, I always say, make it be part of a discussion, right? Martin said, don't necessarily put your job on the line by poking someone in the eye, right? But know, enough to put it out there for discussion, be able to have a, an iterative process that talks through potential options and then selects one and moves it forward and then follows up on that as well. So in my mind, AI is not going to be able to do all of that, right? AI kind of, like Martin said, speeds it up, makes it more actionable, more timely, but it's still going to take a team of individuals, I think, to use that information and decide what to do with it. I mean, to me, that's never going to go away. Maybe it's going to be less of a group of people because some of the button pushers may not, need to be there anymore. But I think the management side is still going to be able to use that information as it sees fit, and that's not going to be replaced by AI at any time that I can see.
But is there a scenario where we would look at, maybe you only need one person to do what three people used to be able to do, but, pushing buttons, maybe there'll be more buttons to push, so we can do more, so we can take on more projects. So we still need the same number of people, but they're actually going to be able to do more with AI.
Possibly.
Yeah. So I don't think it's even about doing more, it's doing the right stuff, right?
Right.
We do a terrible job at projects. Benchmarking tells us that 1% of the time we hit cost, schedule, and production attainment in the oil and gas business. So it would be nice just to hit 15 or 20% would be mega improvement around the world. Yeah, I think going back to students, I think you just got to correct their perception, because if you told them we're going to send you on a job site in the middle of Mississippi for 6 months, punching time cards and timesheets and filling in daily logs, you wouldn't be able to recruit them. If you told them we're going to sit you in an office in downtown Houston with AI interrogating all this data, they'd take the job. So I think it's how you frame it. Attracting people into the industry is they're always looking for the technical side of things, not the geek stuff.
I think that leads into your next, point possibly about remote work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about remote work, so that's a good segue. I think
You were listening.
so. Mike, you have been vocal, I
read
think,
it.
on LinkedIn and other places that you are an opponent of remote work in this industry. But Martin, you worked at Chevron, and Chevron had a pretty lax remote work policy. I think they let people work remote, but then managers had to come back or something. Who's right here? Who's wrong? Maybe somebody can settle this for us. Is remote work killing project control careers?
So let me start. So I'm not necessarily an opponent of remote work because I think there's definitely a time and place for it. But what I think happened during COVID, because it was forced to happen, right, is that, even in construction, a lot of the support staff for construction projects had to be remote. That was required because of COVID, right? So there was, essential personnel. Obviously, the builders were still on site, but a lot of the staff, management staff, were off-site being remote. And those projects still got executed, maybe not quite as efficiently as they would have if people were more on site, but they still happened. So I think now the thought is, even in our industry, most of which is construction, not everyone I'm sure out there is construction focused, but the thought is it worked during COVID, it should be able to still work moving forward. And I just think it worked because it had to work. Moving forward, there still needs to be a certain amount of on-site presence to really understand what's happening on the project, to be able to talk to the people doing the work, to really, show yourself as a member of the team and not someone sitting in a back office totally separated and really not understanding where the challenges and where the issues are. So there needs to be a balance for sure, some degree of site presence to really understand what's happening where the rubber meets the road. That's my issue.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You didn't cut me off. I was pausing to think.
Okay,
really
I just
deep.
wanted to make sure you didn't jump ahead of me there.
So I think it's a double-edged sword. We started off working from home, and now it's working remote. And when you put the remote into the equation, where is it? It might not be your home. It could be a technical center in India, which is Chevron is expediting that. or it could be a financial center down in Argentina. And so it's shaking up the workforce. It also enables the other side of the coin. There's a lot more collaboration, right? You know, international projects, international engineering, and also finding where your subject matter expert is. If they're in Egypt, you just grab them, right? You don't have to even get them on a plane anymore. The way we work in is very different. Some things in operations, some examples of Chevron, you might have seen it on LinkedIn and things like that. We've got these little robotic dogs, right? And what they do is they'll go into hazardous areas where extremely dangerous for humans to go in, especially if there's a situation going on, and they can report back, and the engineers can knock themselves out in some remote location, come up with a solution, and then a work plan. So seeing lots of applications coming in from that work remote. But the other side of the coin again, from my own perspective, and mentoring quite significantly, is how do you manage your career? If you're in your bedroom on a laptop, how do you manage your career? And I'm quoting Ed Miro of IPA on that one. It's extremely challenging, you know. We're still humans. Out of sight is out of mind. Is still there. And also, how do you learn those soft skills we touched on as well? You know, I'm seeing a lot on Teams where you use avatars or people go blank and you don't know if they're even present, right? So there's a lot of challenges, pros, cons, but those who are good at it are good at it. And I think we started to see people who weren't the best at it phasing out a little bit. So it's just a change. I hated it at first because I've always been I've got to be there, even if it was somewhere pretty awful, middle of Timbuktu. I got used to it. I'm okay with it now. So.
I was just going to say, I think, you know, and I'm a big proponent of people, you know, collaborating with others and you know, being able to be on a job site, in particular if we're talking about a construction project, to see what's going on there. But I think an important caveat is that this is not your parents' remoteness. You know, working remotely now is a lot different than it looked like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And our ability to collaborate. I mean, someone said, well, you know, it's great to be able to, someone, you know, pops their head in and say, hey, have you got a few minutes if you're all working in the office? But I get that all the time on Teams. Someone says, hey, got a minute? And and you know, or it just rings and all of a sudden I'm in a meeting. So we're still able to collaborate with someone being remote in different locations. It's not the same as, you know, being on a job site, obviously, but it does get us a large part of the way there. Now, what remote's going to look like 5 years from now, you know, when we may have drones going out and taking cameras and video on job sites so that, no, you can sit in your bedroom in your pajamas and tour the job. Maybe it's coming and it's really going to make it so much easier to work remotely. I don't think it'll ever be 100% replacement, but it's certainly done more than it used to be.
Yeah, it's just some industries more than others, I think. And I think our industry, our base industry being construction, I think there's still always going to be an element of having to be there to a certain extent, because you just miss so much if you're not there, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
you
it.
know, we talk about, you know, Michael talks about claims, you know, the whole idea of seeing, you know, impacts and delays as they're occurring contemporaneously instead of retrospectively, right? So those are two big claims words for you. But being able to see it as it's happening, talk to people as it's happening, you don't miss it and wind up having to come back to it weeks later. It's just, I just think it's so much more efficient to have some degree of site presence.
Yeah, when we do, right, there's a difference between sort of a after the fact consulting assignment as a, you know, a retrospective assignment. We work very well as a team. The group that I work with that's potentially spread out with different expertise. I like to be in the office regularly. The thing that sort of worries me a bit is for new people in the business and people out of school any business, starting out working remotely or working from home and not getting sort of that interaction and that benefit that you get from being around others who are experienced in your field. That worries me more than sort of a lot of like the way that, I work and I think many of us work. I mean, listen, we're all here in person, right? And I think, I mentioned this before, I'm tired of webinars, right, for meetings. And I look, I want face-to-face meetings. I want to meet. I want to socialize. That's the backbone of our association, is our events. And, I think that's the benefit that we have. And I don't want that to get lost, right?
Yeah. And to the points we're talking about, so you can watch everything remote in your pajamas in your bedroom, right? But how do you know what you're looking at if you've never been there? I think that's a big sensory experience. As humans, we don't just look through a little, iPad goggle. We take a whole lot of stuff in.
Well,
Spatial.
what I heard is there's kind of like two levels of remote work, I would almost say. So there's like remote, you're in the back office. That could still be a remote problem where it's like, look, if you have something being manufactured somewhere, you need to go there, meet those people and be in the work. So I think that's like one remote problem that, we're talking about here. And then the second is, how do you light your career as a remote person? Maybe the technology is not there yet. We'll see. I think we've got some skeptics on the panel, probably justified to some degree. It's going to be an interesting future, and I appreciate that. One of the things you guys mentioned, just to switch it up a little bit, you talked about going global, and all of you have worked on these mega global projects. Obviously, that requires a lot of coordination, remote work, et cetera, but so Michael, you were just in Brazil. It was a huge project control gathering.
Yeah.
Martin, you've worked on like every continent. All of you guys have. What do you see as, is project controls the same everywhere? For a lot of these people that are going to want to go international, are they learning the right skills? Or does project controls have some regional differences, would you say?
From an association perspective, right? Now let sort of Martin take the on the ground project controls perspective. And this is to my point about social interaction and meeting people face to face. We have in Brazil's a great example. Great section, great event, great people. All, I think in general, for humans, I think the more people we meet in different places, I think the more we realize we're all sort of the same, right? And that was an important part of, and it's easy, it seems kind of obvious, right? But until you experience it, I think that that's the perspective I have. But one thing going and being on the ground in a different location that might do business a little differently, not necessarily extremely different, but social interaction was obviously very important. But we're also facing, as an association, competition from other places as well. That might be there in other parts of the world that isn't there in what I'll say is North America, which is really the more than half of the association. And that was eye-opening. And there's competition out there. Again, I keep saying these things that feel and seem obvious, but until you actually experience them and see them, they might not really, the extreme examples and the impact it could have might not really be there yet. And it was a bit eye-opening from that perspective.
So picking up on the point you asked, so AACE's standards, recommended practices are global, because people are working with oil companies or EPCs who are global entities, and embedded in everything they do is AACE. We've got vendors here, everything they do is wrapped around foundationally those things. So people, even if they're not aware of it, are still doing it. I think the biggest challenge when you start this international outreach is that there's a lot of cultural differences. I was joking earlier with one of the booths was getting set up a little late, and I said, "Oh, we're on Brazilian time." Yeah, it's mañana, whenever, it sort of runs that way a little bit. Other places, everything's literal, you know. There's also a certain etiquette in meetings, things like that.
For sure.
There's lots of different nuances when you start going international, and then you're in the world of geopolitics, and don't need to go there, right? But we've seen, COVID, huge disruption from that. We've now got huge disruption in the Middle East again. If you're on an international project, you're reading the news every day. I mean, it's stuff like that goes on. It can be an earthquake in Turkey, and suddenly you find out it affects a project in Australia, and that was a real event. So that's the difference of when you start going international. Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't done international in a while, but when I was at Parsons a few years ago, we had a ton of international contracts, a lot of them related to the Iraqi reconstruction effort after the war with Iraq. And I can tell you, the thing that I learned back then is there's a whole subset within the project controls community that's what they want to do. They are road warriors. They want to be, go to an international project because a lot of that is tax-free. If it's in an area like Iraq, there was, hazardous duty pay on top of being tax-free. So it's a small subculture within our industry that if you know who those people are, you can always find people that are willing to go international and be on site for, years, because that's what they're doing. A lot of them are towards the end of their career, so they want to put a nest egg away before they retire fully. But it's very interesting. There's this whole subset of people that's what they want to do with, that in that part of their career, be international on a long-term project, living there, putting that money away because it's tax-free. And it's just really interesting once you find these people and get to know them, and you can then use them as resource base to execute international work, throughout your career if you find those people and get to know them.
So talking international, I'm not an international tax exile living in Houston. I've only lived in 2 places, been to over 50 countries, so it's a bit of I'm not quite one of those guys. Yeah. Hey, Chris, what about you?
No, I find it fascinating to learn about project controls in other countries. It's generally the same from a cost and schedule perspective. Contract forms may differ a little bit, just how the details of how it's applied may vary a little bit, but it's largely the same. Claims can look quite different in other countries. You have the legal structure and even methodologies change a lot in different parts of the world. And then some countries, it's just you go out on a golf course and reach some settlement.
Other countries, you don't have claims.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite experiences is being stuck in a trailer on a Greek island, working for an Italian contractor with a project team made up of engineers and project controls people, half from Spain and half from Finland, with a bunch of Americans scattered in for doing the scheduling. And that was, talk about dispute resolution, right? I mean, that was, and the things you would hear in the trailer, just sitting there. And that was probably one of the most interesting times of my career, was that. All the different cultures that, in the end, have the same goal but can't agree on what to order for lunch.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of students here that are wanting to pursue that. I know I would have as a young buck. That sounds like a lot of fun. I wonder if they had a lot of fights about soccer. Okay, well, we have time for one more question. I kind of want to hit with this one thing because you're a unique panel and only you can answer this, which is you've all sat in the big chair. Some people out here might be wanting someday to be president of this association. Michael, you're a president right now. So what surprised you the most about leading this society and versus leading like a project or something, say?
In the short answer is really around how fast this has gone in the president's chair. And it's a 3-year term that's boiled down to 1-year term. And there's a lot of different routes through the association to this position, but they all, the commonality of all of it is we're all volunteers, right? And
They
so
don't
there's,
pay you?
I think they got paid, but I'm still
Of
waiting.
course, Martin found that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but how fast it's gone, and things that I foresaw, but we do have a lot of continuity on our board in terms of how we set up a strategic plan, and it's intended to be multi-year. We have continuity with our executive director and our headquarters staff. And, that's a tremendous asset for the associations, the people that we have in headquarters. And that sort of in a lot of ways, I think I've talked to all these guys that seem to have a little more tumultuous time when they were president with the association than I feel like I've had. But headquarters is in sort of this continuity across the planning, right? Planning, we want to plan. I think has made it smooth. And
I can add, so, and one thing that Michael said, we're an association of volunteers. That is a positive and sometimes not so positive because, I remember after I was done being president, I was chair of the education board for a year. And at that point, there was a push to actually get a lot of our training material out online as online training courses that you could sign up for and pay for and be able to do virtually. And I think that has happened to a certain extent, but I don't think it was fully recognized by the executive director at that point and by the staff how much work actually goes into an initiative like that. And when you're working with, a group of volunteers that all, for the most part, have a day job, except for people like Martin that are already retired, it's very hard to put a group together that can commit to, a very time-intensive initiative like that. So things, because we're, our support staff, which is no longer even based in Morgantown 100% because they went virtual there, is, pretty downsized from what it used to be. Now they're all spread out. So we are, in order to get things done, you've got to put a group of volunteers together to try to find time to commit to something. And if it's too big of an effort and too broad of an initiative, it's going to take a lot of time to happen. And sometimes it won't happen because it's too hard to get, volunteers to put the right amount of time aside to focus on that initiative. So that's just something to consider. It takes time. Some of our materials are we're in the process of redoing our skills and knowledge number 6. I was, part of that review process. There's other things that we're looking at in terms of references and our RPs that are starting to be outdated. It just takes time because, we are mostly trying to do two things at once, work our day job and to support the association as best we can. So anyone that wants to volunteer to be part of those committees and subcommittees, absolutely, you're welcome to do that because we need the help. And it's just, putting the time together and the minds together to be more, cutting edge than we would like, or than we have been up to this point, but we would like to be, is definitely something that we aspire to do for sure.
Yeah, I think I would probably characterize it as there's two levels to the association. There are the users, those people that come to AACE to look at our recommended practices, the body of knowledge, and use that in their day-to-day job. And then there are the contributors, the people that volunteer, they write papers, they sit on the technical boards. And I think what you get out of this association as a contributor is exponential over just being a user. So if you want to sit in this chair one day, really all you have to do is show an interest and be willing to give some time. But what you'll get out of it is so much more than what you have to put into it, I think.
Yeah, and I'd just close out on that with, so you don't ask to be in this chair. There's an election process sort of goes on. So stars have to align.
But there aren't many people fighting for it.
No, we really put them off today.
Right?
No, but what I would say is you learn skills that you can take back to the workplace. Yeah. It's servant leadership, it's influence, it's a non-profit, everyone's a volunteer, everyone's got an opinion. And when you're the president, that's the email that gets all the opinions. But when you look back on it, it's a blast, right? Mm-hmm. But it's better being a past president than being the president. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Soon enough. But the hard work of the association has done the real effort, and Mike was talking about, was our associate boards, our interest groups, our sections, tremendous number of volunteer hours go into this organization. Mm-hmm. And sitting here in this chair is become almost sort of easy compared to what people are producing in sort of the thought leadership that comes out of the association.
All right. So thank you, guys. We have some time for Q&A. What I heard is the president's job is easy, and that's a nice way to end it.
Don't disagree.
So maybe, does anybody in the audience have any questions? We've got about 10 minutes here for a little Q&A.
Yeah, quite crowd. We need to stir them
Yeah,
up.
quite crowd.
Yeah.
I might have a question, actually. What's your advice to your 25-year-old self? Lightning round, short answers only.
To my what, 5-year-old?
Your 25-year-old
Oh,
self, what's your
25-year-old. I
advice?
thought I would misheard that, yeah.
Start drinking early.
So for me, 25 years old, I was, I was a Marine in, I think, Desert Shield, Desert Storm when I was 25. And I would just say my advice to myself is it gets better than this moving forward in your career, especially if you decide to leave the military and do something on the civilian side. But take the lessons that you have learned wherever you happen to get your start. Mine happened to be in the Marine Corps, and leverage the things that make sense and that you can apply down the road. I rarely have the opportunity to yell at someone in my Marine Corps voice like I could back then, but I remember how to be a leader. I remember how to get things done, and I've been able to apply that in my career on the civilian side after leaving the Marine Corps. So it's just taking lessons as they come, understanding that you need to potentially tailor them moving forward to be able to ultimately apply them throughout the rest of your life and the rest of your career is what's the important thing. So.
So my 25-year-old self, so I still remember it. And that was, again, a mentor got hold of me and basically told me to get my blank, blank, blank together, right? So 25, I was already running the M&E side of 3 petrochemical projects on site. I'd got divorced. I'd moved house 3 times. I'd already worked away 3 years. I had a child. And so I was a bit of a train wreck. I wasn't quite a James Dean. But it was at that point, it was like, slow down, think it through. And that's when I started the academic period of my life and got chartered in this, that, and the other, and value engineering and quality management, you name it. 5 years of pretty intense sort of study. And I wouldn't quite say it was straightening myself out, but I had a plan then and I followed it. Before then, I was just an accidental train wreck. Yeah. Still remember it. Yep. Had a nice sports car, though. Yeah.
I would just say, always be asking questions.
Yeah.
Always be trying to learn something new.
Yes.
Yeah, and it sounds cliche, but I think have some urgency to get where you want to go, and again, more cliche, be confident, but take the time to really learn things and learn about yourself and learn things that will benefit where you decide to want to go. But that sense of urgency, because life comes at you fast. I think that's a quote from a movie, and and I think it's true. It certainly is true.
Yeah.
Ferris Bueller, I think, right?
Yeah. But was confident and cocky, and I suffered from the cocky and needed the edges knocking off a few times. Yeah. But not lots changed. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. From 25 to 37, you guys look fantastic. Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming out here. Ladies and gentlemen, the 4 presidents of the AACE.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. I got your attention. Before everybody runs off, we've got gifts to thank our